Nuclear disaster narrowly avoided at Zaporizhzhia, with plans of evacuations throughout eastern Ukraine. 6 months on, Russian and Belarusian nationals in Ukraine expressed the emotional turmoil the war has inflicted on them. Iodine tablets have reportedly been supplied to residents near the Zaporizhzhia power plant, amid very real fears that fighting around the complex could lead to a nuclear catastrophe. The precautionary measure follows a temporary disconnect to Europe's largest power plant from Ukraine's national grid on Thursday. Kyiv says it has now partly reconnected the plant to the national system. President Volodymyr Zelensky underlined that the situation remains very risky and dangerous. Any further disconnections of the plant from the grid or actions by Russia that could trigger the shutdown of the reactors will again put the plant one step away from disaster. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk has announced plans to expand mandatory evacuations for civilians living on the war's front lines. Speaking on national television, Vereshchuk said evacuating women with children and elderly people would be a priority for some districts of the eastern Kharkiv region and the southern Zaporizhzhia and Mykolaiv regions. Elsewhere, Ukrainian forces have struck an important bridge by Russian occupying forces in the southern Kherson region, serving a blow to Moscow's offensive. In the suburban town of Bucha outside of Kyiv, scars of war are everywhere you look. For Belarusians living in Ukraine, aftermath of war brings a unique feeling of horror, caught between the crossfires in a war they didn't ask for. Political refugee Karina Podsyomkina arrived in Ukraine just 2 weeks before Russia's invasion. She says, "We know there are Belarusians who are fighting on the side of Ukraine. There are volunteers who have nowhere to go because they are Belarusians. When I see my blue Belarusian passport, I want to burn it. Belarusians are people without a country. Nobody needs them." It turns out that you are asking for protection from the country which is at war. It turns out you are safer in the country that is at war rather than in Belarus. For Russians in Ukraine, the feelings are similar, with many voicing support for their host country. Andrei Sidorkin, who has lived in Ukraine for 17 years, returning to his homeland is no option. He says returning to Russia is out of the question. There I will most likely get 15 to 20 years in prison. I'm not sure about that, but the probability is very high given the scale of repression there now. Sidorkin was not accepted to the Ukrainian army, but did make Molotov cocktails and help evacuate artwork from museums in Kyiv.
While European consumers experience rocketing energy bills, at the eastern borders of the EU, Russia is burning millions of cubic meters of gas per day. A bright torch is visible above Portovaya gas plant in the Leningrad region. According to the Rystad energy analysts, Gazprom is most likely burning off excess gas that was intended for shipment to Germany. Supplies via the Nord Stream 1 pipeline were cut after the invasion of Ukraine. Germany considers this a political move, but Gazprom insists it is down to technical problems. This situation may also cause serious concern among environmentalists. Russia has the highest volumes of gas burned during mining, which leads to additional emissions of CO2. Back in April, the Russian Union of Industrialists warned that with the start of the war and after sanctions, energy companies would be forced to significantly increase flaring beyond recommended levels, due to a lack of space to store excess product. Energy prices are rocketing, and with summer in Europe coming to a close, there are fears the situation could spiral out of control as we head into winter. Governments are scrambling for solutions. The EU has already implemented gas consumption directives, but it may not be enough to avoid blackouts and cut-offs. The industry minister of the Czech Republic, which holds the rotating EU presidency, has called an extraordinary EU summit to address the situation as soon as possible. Europe's biggest economies are set to suffer the most. In France, a country highly dependent on nuclear energy, the shutdown of numerous reactors due to maintenance needs sent the cost per megawatt hour soaring to €900 on the futures market, 10 times higher than a year ago. To make matters worse, renewable energies have suffered the consequences of one of the hottest and driest summers in living memory. Rivers are running low, with no power to move hydroelectric power plants at full capacity or to transport fossil fuel cargo.
Cracks have started to emerge on the walls of homes built on clay-based soils in France. They're a consequence of the repeated heat waves and lack of rain this summer. This year, up to 10 million homes in the country could be affected. For some buildings, they are a threat to their very existence.
Here is a crack, so there is a risk of danger if this facade collapses, with the roof that will follow, and that could be catastrophic.
And in the sprawling vineyards of the Bordeaux region, the grape harvest is now well underway. But it's about a month early. Usually it begins in mid-September. It's not been an easy year for winemakers, who faced record temperatures.
We usually water the ground before we plant, right after the vine is planted, and maybe once or twice, but this time it's maybe the fourth time we're watering the young vines on top of what we usually do.
Gilles, 80 cows in the north of France, should be grazing in the fields, but due to a lack of rain, grass hasn't been growing since the beginning of summer. For now, the cows are being fed fodder, but this can't last for very long.
In principle, cows will be sold because they cannot be fed. If cows are sold, there will be much less milk next year, which means even more pressure on dairy products next year, from 2023.
France, like other European nations, has been badly hit by wild temperatures this year. Many farmers cannot afford another bad season next year.
Theatre goers at Edinburgh's Fringe Festival have probably noticed mounds of rubbish uncollected across the Scottish capital. That's because the city's garbage collectors are holding a 2-week strike over pay and working conditions until the end of the month. Prime Minister Nicola Sturgeon has called on council leaders to offer a pay rise as the pile-ups become a public health hazard.
This is a spectacular exhibition devoted to the French-Hungarian painter Simon Taille, a masterful figure of abstraction whose birth is being celebrated this year. More than 130 masterpieces will be spread over nearly 3,000 meters squared, showcasing the artist's major periods with paintings by Henri Matisse and Jackson Pollock. Many of the works have never been exhibited before and are, for the most part, large-format, centered paintings from the second half of the 20th century. The Biennale di Venezia, created at the end of the 19th century, has established itself as one of the most prestigious artistic events of the year. Until November, tourists and art lovers can enjoy contemporary creations by artists from all over the world. This year's event, with its program and its generic title, The Milk of Dreams, is an unmissable event that uses art to re-enchant a world in the midst of ecological and political upheaval. The Berlin music season opens this weekend with the Musikfest, which features no less than 50 works by over 40 composers. Berlin's leading orchestras will be present, as well as the most prestigious orchestras from Europe and around the world. The festival not only attracts hundreds of musicians, but also thousands of classical music lovers from all over the globe. 33 ensembles in total and numerous soloists will gather for an event to end the summer on a high note.